CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Style sheets control the look and feel of web documents. Cascading refers to the way CSS applies styles one on top of the other. HTML and CSS work hand in hand in web design. HTML contains the page structure and contents whilst CSS defines how HTML elements are displayed. The main benefit of CSS is that it allows you to separate style from the content. This makes a site easier to maintain as the pages and their content grow and change. There are three ways to implement CSS. These are, inline, embedded and external CSS. Within the inline CSS, a unique style is applied to a single element. In order to use an inline style, add the style attribute to the relevant HTML element. Internal styles are defined within the style element inside the head section of HTML page. It is recommended to use an internal style sheet if one single page has a unique style. Otherwise, external CSS should be used. With external CSS, all styles are contained in a single text file which is saved with the extension .css. This file is referenced to in the HTML using the link tag inside the head section. CSS Syntax. An external CSS style rule contains three parts: the selector, the property, and its value. Whilst an inline CSS style rule only contains the property and its value. The selector points to the HTML element you want to style. This is why an inline rule doesn't require it, as the style is applied on the element directly. A declaration block can contain one or more decorations separated by semicolons. And each declaration includes a property and a value separated by a colon. There are different types of selectors. The most generic is the type selector. This selector targets element types on the page. For example, to target all the paragraphs. This turns all paragraphs text purple. ID selectors allows you to style an HTML element that has a specific ID attribute regardless of its position in the document tree. To select an element with a specific ID to style, use a hash character followed by the ID name. Class selectors work in a similar way. To select an element with a specific class to style, use the dot character followed by the class name. The major difference between them is that IDs can only be applied once per page. They are unique. Whilst classes can be used multiple times. You cannot start a class or ID name with a number. You can start it with a letter, or underscore, and then any sequence of numbers and characters. It is best practice to give them descriptive names so that when looking back at your code you know what they are. Another type of selector is the descendant selector. As the name dictates, these selectors are used to select elements that are direct descendants of another element. Pseudo classes were introduced with CSS 3. They allow us to style elements, or parts of elements that exist in the document tree without using scripts, or elements in a particular state. A pseudo class starts with a colon. The first child pseudo class matches an element that is the first child element of another element. The last child pseudo class matches an element that is the last child of another element. A pseudo element starts with a double colon, and is used to select specific parts of an element. For example, the before and after pseudo elements. These allow us to add content either before or after an element. The box model. The CSS box model represents the design and layout of the site. It consists of margins, borders, padding, and the actual content. The properties work in the following order: top, right, bottom, and left. CSS uses the box model to determine how big boxes are and how to place them. The box model is also used to calculate the actual width and height of HTML elements. When working with HTML and CSS, it is important to understand how the total width of an element is calculated. When you set the width and height properties of an element, you set the width and height of the content area. For example, when setting a background color to a box, it covers the content area as well as the padding. Width and height. You can assign an element a specific width and height using the width and height properties. The values can be specified in many measurements. You can also define the minimum and maximum sizes of an element. Background color. This property is used to specify the background color of an element. The value can be specified in three ways: a hexadecimal value, a RGB value, or a color name. Background image. You can even set a background image with a background image property. The URL specifies the path to the image file. Both relative and absolute paths are supported. By default, the image is placed at the top left corner of an element, and is repeated vertically and horizontally to cover the entire element. To prevent the image from repeating, you must specify the background repeat property and set the value to no repeat. A value of repeat X will repeat an image across the horizontal axis only. Repeat Y will repeat the image vertically only. It can also take the value of inherit, meaning it will take the same value as the element's parent. To specify more than one image, just separate the URLs with commas. The background attachment property sets whether a background image is fixed in place or scrolls with the page. The value of fixed means that the image will not move with the element, even if the element has a scrolling mechanism. The value of scroll means the image will scroll with the rest of the page. Basic customizations with CSS. List style type. This property allows us to customize list item markers. In HTML there are two list types, unordered and ordered. These list markers can be styled and customized further, such as using the value lower alpha, or square. List style image specifies an image to be used as the marker, whilst list style position specifies the position of the marker box. The values it accepts are inside or outside. Outside is the default. Use the list style shorthand property for setting the type, image, and position in one declaration. If you leave out any value, the default value for the missing property will be used automatically. Styling links. In addition to styling links with regular CSS properties such as color, font family, etc., they can be styled differently depending on what state they are in using pseudo selectors. A link defines the style used for normal unvisited links. A visited defines the style for visited links. A hover defines the style for a link that is hovered over by the mouse. A active defines the style for a link once it is active, once you click on it. When setting the style for multiple link states, you must follow particular order rules. A hover must come after a link, and a visited. A active must come after a hover. By default, text links are underlined by the browser. To remove the underline, use the text decoration property with a value of none. You can also use border none, to remove the border from images which have links. Styling the mouse cursor. With CSS you can change the mouse cursor style. A customized mouse cursor can provide an interesting experience for users, however choosing the wrong style can be misleading. Choose cursor styles carefully. Font family. The font family property specifies the font for an element. There are two types of family, generic and specific. If the name of a font family is more than one word, it must be surrounded by quotes. Separate each value with a comma to show they are alternatives if the one before it cannot be found or loaded for whatever reason. It is best practice to add fallbacks to prevent unexpected behavior. It is also good practice to specify a generic family at the end. Font size. The font size property sets the size of the font. You can use numerical values such as pixels or ems to manipulate font size, or even keywords such as small and large. Although keywords are not really recommended unless you do not want the user to be able to increase the size of the font because it will adversely affect your site's appearance. Using pixel values is a good choice if you need pixel accuracy, otherwise em is a good relative size unit, meaning elements with this size unit will adjust their size based on other factors such as the parent element's size. If you don't set the font size on the page, the browsers use their default size, which is 16 pixels. Text align. The text align property specifies the horizontal alignment of text in an element. By default, text is aligned to the left. Values. The property can take are, left, right, center, and justify. With justify, Each line is stretched so that every line has equal width, and the left and right margins are straight. Text decoration. This property can be used to decorate text. Values include non, which is the default; inherit, which means the element takes the value from its parent; overline, draws a horizontal line above the text; underline, draws a horizontal line below the text; and line through, draws a horizontal line through the text. This is the same as the shtml tag. You can combine values in a space-separated list to add multiple decorations. Text indent. Text indent property specifies how much horizontal space should be left before the beginning of the first line of text. Its values include length, which can be specified in px, centimeters m, and percentage, and inherit. Negative values are allowed. If a negative value is used, the first line will be indented to the left. Text shadow. This adds shadow to text. It can take a total of 4 values. The first value defines the distance of the shadow in the x, horizontal, direction; the second value sets the distance in the y, vertical, direction; the third value defines the blur of the shadow, and the fourth sets the color. You can use any CSS supported color format to define the color. Negative values are also supported for the X and Y offsets. Warning: Internet Explorer 9 and earlier do not support the text shadow property. Color property. The color property specifies the color of the text. We can define the color value in multiple ways, such as using hex values, RGB values, or even a color name. Vertical align. The vertical line property set an element vertical alignment. Commonly used values are top, middle, and bottom. However, the property can also take the values baseline, sub, super, percentage, and px. The vertical line property does not act the same way for all elements, for example for block line elements such as divs.